More people now employed in the renewable energy industry than in all the fossil fuels put together. If he supports shale gas, well, that's going to knock out coal as well. So it's a relatively forlorn attempt to sort of stop the tide of evolutionary history. But we're stuck with it, and it's going to have huge implications. So I wanted to just say a few words about business mindsets, how people think about all of the issues we've been talking about today, but also about our planetary reality. And I love this comment by Niels Bohr. Now, he was obviously talking about quantum science and so on. You could actually say very much the same thing about our unsustainability. Most people talk about it, but haven't yet, in any proper sense, bless you, of where we're headed. And this is one of the diagrams that, we're told that we're going into a post-truth environment or reality, that experts don't really matter any longer. I think science is absolutely critically important. We really have to fund our scientists better. We have to start paying much more attention to what they're saying and acting on the basis of what they're saying. But you look at this 400-year timescale, and many of you have seen it. And since 1950, I was born in 1949. I feel immensely guilty that in my watch, almost, the climate change signal, the carbon dioxide signal, just completely gone off the scale. Here's the good news. ExxonMobil probably will disappear in the next 20 to 25 years. They've just appeared right at the bottom of a ranking of fossil fuel companies who are not taking account of sustainable development. And in many ways, these companies are, whether we like it or not, and they look huge, they look immovable, they look like fixtures in the environment. How could they possibly go? I think they're going to go much, much faster than we might imagine. This is even better news. Around the world, one of the things that I did many, many years ago, in 1994, was come up with the notion of the triple bottom line of people, planet, profit. I get bored quite easily, so we did that for about 6 or 7 years, and I couldn't bear to hear that term any longer. And Shell and people like that were using it. But now, well over 1,000 companies around the world have embraced that triple bottom line of economic, social, and environmental, value added or destroyed. Some extraordinary companies among their number. 2 of the ones I founded, Sustainability and Volans, both big corporations. And it's wonderful to be part of that wider and very rapidly growing network of businesses around the world. Businesses, as you can see, really committed to being leading a global movement, best for the world rather than sort of best practice or whatever. And one of the joys of my life, tomorrow I'm chairing a meeting at the Social Stock Exchange. So this is a stock exchange. It's now the 3rd formal stock exchange in the United Kingdom, which is listing social purpose businesses. And part of what we do and part of what we'll be doing tomorrow, one of the reasons I was asking about impact earlier on, because I'm desperate to know how to do what we do considerably better than we're currently able to do it. But again, immensely exciting to see the sorts of businesses that are coming through. So in a way, is this about just small companies and entrepreneurial companies? No, it isn't. I think some big companies, and Nokia were referenced earlier on before they finally went in a bad direction. But a growing number of companies will start to understand this agenda in a quite different way, and rather like dinosaurs evolving into birds, start to mutate and evolve in some really interesting ways. And I just want to say a few words of context, which will give you a couple of examples. You know that scientists say that we're now moving into the Anthropocene, and that they date that back to 1950 also. So this is the first geological era in the history of this planet where one species, our own, dictates the planetary reality, which is at one stage quite exciting. Look what we've done. But another level, look what we've done. But who's actually going to sort this out? Who's going to clean this up? Who's responsible for all this stuff? And again, we can't simply point the finger at ExxonMobil. And in the midst of this, you've got this extraordinary building shift now of population, and this mixes population and GDP, so this is out to about 2050, and it's just a representation of what will happen in our world over that period of time. If you read publications like The Economist, increasingly they're covering this new reality. And now, it sounds negative, but actually I'm in this context, I'm immensely excited. I think what a number of these businesses have been mentioned earlier on today, but here the Google car, what's beginning to happen is immensely exciting. And it's like an industrial revolution on steroids or on speed. It is going to go so fast. And the hybridization between these different emerging sectors of tomorrow's economy is going to be fast and furious. One of my concerns is that the sustainability movement is finding it very difficult to track all of this, because in a way it's focused on the old sectors. It's focusing on oil, chemicals, automotive. Nothing wrong with all of that. But the direction of travel is very much towards big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, autonomous everything, geoengineering, God forbid, but we're going to go there. And this is a way that we try and capture that for ourselves. So two axes. Horizontal one is impact. So on the left-hand side, 1 billion people negatively impacted. Positive side, 1 billion people positively impacted. Now that may seem abstract, but you take two brothers, Larry Page, shown here on the right of Google, and his brother, who I met earlier on this year in Silicon Valley, Carl. Larry Page, like many entrepreneurial people, is now talking about things that affect or benefit 1 billion or hundreds of millions of people. Carl is talking about, he works at the Anthropocene Institute, issues that will impact, and in some cases possibly even kill, 1 billion people. So for me, that's not a totally abstract horizontal axis. And then the really spooky, difficult one is the one where we go the vertical axis from incremental change to exponential change. And what we're plotting here is business as usual, referenced earlier on, change as usual, which is the way that we describe the wonderfully well-motivated efforts of NGOs, campaigners, businesses, governments around the world, but really doesn't stack up to the level of change that we need. And what we see, and I think the science shows us, is a number of trajectories that are taking us towards breakthrough. It's very difficult to think that through properly, but that's often where we seem to be headed. And the question is then, how do we go towards breakthrough? And about 18 months ago, working with Generation Foundation, some of you will know Generation Impact Investment Management was set up by Al Gore and David Blood. We did a report, and we do lots of reports. One of my colleagues, she and I have worked together for 12 years, just put her head in her hands and said, we've done so many reports. Why don't we do something different? So I said, well, that's a nice idea, what should we do? And she said, why don't we do a play? Why don't we do a dramatization? So that's actually what we ended up doing. We did a dramatization, working with a playwright, of a board, fictional board, but under stress, and trying to work through a particular set of systemic challenges. That was the stretch agenda. And in a way, no accident, towards the end of that dramatization, one group of people in the room, there were two of them, they'd been invited by the chair, a woman, Canadian woman, as observers. And they simply erupted. They said, basically, we can't listen to this anymore. This is our future you're talking about. We need you to think and act in a very different way. So, in a way, I'm surprised that we don't see more anger in the world. When I was at university first time around in the 1960s, I studied one young woman who went to prison for 12 years for trying to blow up British government ministers. I knew some of the Bader-Meinhof support group in Hamburg during that same period. You may say I'm very bad at picking my friends. But actually afterwards, I looked back and said, why were these young people thinking that way? Because many of them were very highly educated. Answer, because they tried change, they thought they tried change. It didn't happen on the timescales that they thought, so they became angry and they became destructive. We are so close into some of that happening again. On the upside, we've got the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, great, there are 17 of them, and any of you can recite them will get a golden prize at the end of the evening. But at least they're directional, at least they give us some sense of what, in a way we describe it, the future would want. That you can view them like a purchase order for business activity today from the 2030s. We're not yet treating them that way, but perhaps we should. And just recently, about 5 or 6 weeks ago, the UN Private Sector Forum happened in New York, and for the first time ever, we got some of the exponential folk onto the agenda. One particular person from Singularity University, Meng Han, he did a brilliant job. But at the end, two corporate people I'd known for ages, came up to me and said, why have we got these exponential thinkers, entrepreneurs here? And I said, well, if you'd asked me 30 years, why are we getting Greenpeace in? I'd have given you the same answer. If you'd asked me 15 years ago, why are we getting Muhammad Yunus and social entrepreneurs in? Same answer. Because you need to look beyond the current horizon. You need to look towards the edge of the current system. And some of you may have seen this document. It's outside. This was done for the Business and Sustainable Development Commission. So this is all or most of the business-to-business platforms, World Economic Forum, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, Global Compact, BT, coming together. And what we've looked at there is future business models. Now, I suspect a lot of people in this room know a lot more about business models than I ever will. So this is obviously an open invitation. If you do, or you're working on things that are really interesting, we'd love to hear more from you. Moving towards the conclusion, I said earlier on that sometimes dinosaurs evolve into birds. The same can happen with businesses, and very, very rarely with industrial sectors. And we start to see some really interesting examples of this, where, for example, you've got the power utility sector in Europe, where, as many of you will know, in the space of about 4 or 5 billion euros was wiped off the valuation. So it was half their capitalization at that time. It was wiped off this sector. All sorts of reasons for that, what's happening in coal, what's happening in nuclear, but critically what's happening in renewable energy. What you've got with Francesco Staracci at Enel is a CEO who really not only understands this, he came from the green power part of the business, but is trying to rebuild Enel around that. Another example, I declare an interest. I've worked with this CEO since 1989, Patrick Thomas. Some of you will know that Biomaterial Sciences is spinning out, IPOing out as Covestro. Patrick is basically building the whole new proposition around, in effect, the triple bottom line. And it's interesting to see him describe his business as an 80-year-old startup with something like 12 billion euros in revenues annually. But that's the mindset that he is trying to conjure across his business, and then beyond the business, in their supply chains, sectors, and so on. And some of the areas that they're moving into, they've just done the biggest windmill blade in the world, a novel material which they make, never been tried before. One of the things that really excites me is this one. People talk about carbon capture and storage. You suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and you stick it in holes in the ground. Stupid. Really expensive. But what you can do now is capture that carbon dioxide and start to use it. So one of the things that Covestro and others are starting to do is use it in producing polymers. Now that's only the beginning. So the question is, how do we start to see carbon as almost a miraculous material? A couple of final slides. I said earlier on that I thought, in a way, the impact assessment world is currently more or less where the Wright brothers were when they were sort of stumbling off the sand dunes in Kitty Hawk. I think where the sustainable business world is more generally, it's more like when Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic. And it may be worth remembering that when he did that in 1927, there was a Republican president, Calvin Coolidge. In a way, it doesn't matter politics. The technology, the new business models come through anyway. But if I were looking for a current day counterpart of the spirit of St. Louis, it would be the solar impulse, which over about 18 months flew right around the world with no fuel. And I just adore Bertrand Piccard, we work with through Covestro, but I love André Borchberg's commentary. I won't read it out, but I think it should be on the wall of every business school in the world. Final slide is this one. So this is very much the territory occupied by people like the X Prize, Singularity University, Google's X initiative. I really envy Astro Teller, his job title. I wish I could be captain of moonshots. But this notion, this goes back to incrementalism versus exponentialism, if you want to put it that way. This notion of what we've got to aim for is a tenfold, a 10 times, a 10x change, not just a 1% or 10%. I think that's the challenge that we all now face. So I'm going to stop there. Say thank you very much for listening. I should have been the one listening, and you should have been the ones talking. But do we have the time for a question or two, or if not? Anyone got a really rapid fire? Tobias.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I'm very happy that you gave this talk because I tried to get the opportunity to say something in the same direction, rather from a natural scientific background, because if we zoom out of this room, states, we look at the planet, right? And the planet is a physical entity which has certain boundaries. And you mentioned them, and you also mentioned population growth, right? So I think if we now add some values and maybe human rights and these kind of things, then we end up in a vision that might be phrased as trying to create a society, of course with economics and all these kind of things, to use or stay within the natural boundaries we have and get life for the people living on that planet, whatever number that is, right, that is most satisfactory. And if we now stick to these physical boundaries, we will then probably come down to a level where we see that economy shouldn't have the paradigm over our lives. Right? The economy is there to serve the purposes of every one of us. And especially the financial sector is taking over economy even, right? So what I try to say is that within this discussion about meaning at work, we should not focus on trying to give recipes to the companies to create meaning in the brains of their workers as a purpose for itself, but rather to see the other way around, that through these physical boundaries, and we are part of the economic and the environmental system on this planet, right? We cannot live without that. We shouldn't keep on sawing the branch we are sitting on, but rather from this vision create purpose in ourselves, and then create companies that serve that purpose. And then maybe dinosaurs might die and maybe startups come up. But then we might also get this factor of 10 or whatever.
Thank you.
Progress.
It's fascinating, and I was listening to this last panel session, and I thought Christine Stimple was absolutely fascinating, really brilliant, great sense of humour, but actually very much representative of that whole order, where you say it's for individuals to sort out their sense of meaning. It's nothing to do with organisations. I think we're moving into a period of such uncertainty that unless organisations of every sort, including the armed forces, can work out ways to create almost that, to conjure this sort of sense of not just meaning, but a forward purpose, they're going to lose so many of their talented people, or not attract them in the first place. And I think that sustainability agenda is part of that. It's not the whole piece. But thank you very much for the challenge and the comment. Sebastian, back to you.
Times like this. I